Welcome to the first of 3 videos instructing you how to use virtual setups in the 3Shape ortho system. So what are virtual setups? Well, virtual setups is a tool for treatment simulation, allowing you to simulate orthodontic treatment decisions such as precise tooth movements, tooth extractions, interproximal reductions or IPR, attachments, and subdivisions of tooth movements in sub-setups. So a little word on navigating the data types here. So on the top we have the patient, as you know, in the patient browser. As you know from previous videos, a patient can have multiple models or cases associated with it. And each case or model can have multiple virtual setups associated with them. And the way it's navigated is that the patient, as you know, is available from the patient browser. The models or cases are also available from the patient browser. But the virtual setups, they are available directly inside the Ortho Analyzer application where the Ortho Planner module is. So the requirements for using virtual setups, you need a license of the Ortho Planner add-on to the Ortho Analyzer to activate this feature. And also please be aware that if you need to export the virtual setups as STL files, that will require the dedicated Planning Model Builder add-on. So what you'll learn in the 3 videos, well, the first video, which is this video, will basically tell you how to define an arch shape for the virtual setup project, how to create a virtual setup project, how to move teeth using several methods actually, how to use a collision detection tool, how to export a virtual setup model set for treatment monitoring, and finally how to export a video animation. The second video, which is more advanced use, will teach you how to define moving constraints, how to understand teeth movements, and how to select an existing virtual setup to create treatment stages, and also how to simulate extractions in IPRs we discussed before. It will also teach you how to use the virtual articulator for virtual setups, and finally to use the inspection tool to validate a virtual setup. And then the final video is more focused on creating aligners in the Ortho Planner module. That will teach you how to move teeth to create an ideal setup, how to add attachments to the teeth, how to do subdivides in the virtual setup into sub-setups, and how to export the planning models in STL for aligner production. And as I said, that requires the Planning Model Builder. But enough about the preliminaries. My name is Henrik. I'm joined today by my colleague Christoph. Hello, Christoph.
Hello.
So Christoph, why don't you tell us how it works?
Sure. So as Henrik has explained, we have the patient browser where all your patients will be listed. And I will now find the case on which I want to do this treatment simulation or virtual setup. So here we have it. You can of course check the previews to control that this is the right case. And as you will notice, this case is not prepared, and that's on purpose because you can work without a base in Ortho Analyzer and the Ortho Planner. So you don't really have to...
Exactly. And we do have a separate video on how to create a virtual base, so we can skip that.
All right, so I'm just going to open the case, double click. So we've opened the case in Ortho Analyzer from the patient browser, and we need to make sure again that it's a segmented case. So this is where the segmentation would take place. A quick way to see if it's segmented is actually to look at it in segmented mode, and here we can remove the soft tissues and have a view of
Okay, so this is definitely a segmented case. Yeah.
So for the segmentation, it's quite important to make sure that the long axis of the crowns are like well defined or in a clinically correct fashion, because this is going to be the starting point of all the movements that the system will compute for the treatment plan. Right, so now I'm just going to go and create a dental arch for this patient, so I can use this as a guide for my virtual setup. To indicate where I'm moving the teeth in space.
Yep.
So here in this feature, we have this dental arch feature. We're going to have a dedicated video to go over the different options we have here to create the dental arch, but just for now, I'm going to trace it using the symmetry option. So I'm going to add a new arch for today's date. We can have different arch shapes for the treatment, for example, so we could call different models of the arch to guide us through the treatment and different stages. For now, I'm going to use the custom option and the symmetry feature, which is really good at this stage because it's going to use the sagittal plane that was defined for the case and allow me to put my points in a symmetrical fashion. So if I draw my point here, as you can see, automatically this spline curve is going to be symmetrical. And I can adapt it. It's very easy. I'm just dragging the point here. As you can see, this is adapted automatically. So this is centered along the sagittal plane. We have a toolkit, you can see, for the virtual setups. And I can now select one tooth. The first button here is the tooth movement, so it's by default going to be positioned on the one that I can use to move the teeth. And I can just, with the mouse, I can move the tooth as I want.
So you double-clicked on the tooth and then you
double-click on any tooth to select it. And then you can see there's some control handles, and then these I can use to do this rotation, but I can also just grab the tooth and move it freely like this. So these movements are like free in space. There's no movement constraints by default, but of course we have actually a chance to create movement constraints that we'll look at in the other video. So that means I can limit how I move the teeth according to some rules that I can type in. So as you can see, I can take the tooth, rotate it here with my mouse, or I can also use the keyboard. So instead of using the mouse here, now I'm going to use the arrow keys of my keyboard, and you can see I'm doing the rotation here. Similarly, if I want to do tipping, if I take this view, well, I can take the tooth, pressing Control will give me this different direction. So you can see now I use the 4 arrows from my keyboard, and I do exactly the movement that is.
And you get that by holding down the Control key.
Yes. Another comment here is that you can see we have the rotation center. This is really the rotation center that was defined at the segmentation step. If you look at the segmentation video, you can see you can adjust its height according to, again, the clinical situation to reflect the actual root of the tooth. So this is the one that we will always use to do any rotations or tips like this. This is really going to be using this rotation center. And then this is the long axis, you can see it. And this is the one that I'm rotating my tooth around. So as I mentioned before, any movement that I do is going to return a value, and this value is calculated from the original long axis position. What we have on the right hand side is actually really describing the actual movement of the tooth in all dimensions. And so I have these two methods of moving my teeth. As you could see, I can do it with the mouse, I can do it with the keyboard, but I can also do it parametrically. So basically, if I want to simulate, let's say, the effect of I'm going to remove the soft tissues, and I'm going to actually remove the surrounding teeth. So I'm only looking at my tooth here. So if I wanted to simulate the effect of a bracket, say, that has a torque or inclination of, let's say, 7 degrees, I can easily type this value here, and this is my effect immediately. Of course, it's not very telling when I don't have any other teeth, but if I put them back on, you will see this effect. And I can adjust it parametrically. So this is quite useful also to make sure that you have some control parametrical values for your movements. So really 3 methods of moving the teeth up to your personal preference. Absolutely. So you can use, I would suggest you can use the mouse movements for the bigger movements, and then you can just fine-tune them with the mouse or parametrically. But you can see there's dimensions, all these different dimensions have changed with my movements, and that's also because namely I use the mouse to move it. So the mouse is really moving it in different dimensions. So this is one way to to move the teeth. I can also move groups of teeth, and that's quite interesting, again, if you want to control what you're doing in the, for example, in the interior segment. So if I want to select several teeth, I can do this with the control key and clicking on the teeth.
Okay.
And now I will be able to do these movements. These movements, mind you, are just in translation, because if we start to do any angular movements, then we don't have a reference for all these teeth. Yeah. So let me put the soft tissues back on. You can see if I move my block of teeth here, well, the soft tissue is gonna follow nicely. So we reconstruct the system like is reconstructing the soft tissues in real time. That's very neat. And as I said before, we created the art shapes on the lower. So I'm just gonna put this here. So if you look in the bottom to the left,
that's what we made before. Yeah.
I have the list of my art shapes. So if I've created several of them, I can pick one of them. And by clicking on it, you can see now we have the art shape on the lower that I defined before. So let's just have a look at how I can use this as a guide for my movements. So it's kind of, it's quite neat here because you will be able to again have a better idea of what you can or cannot move according to some fixed reference.
Oh, nice.
So now I'm going to also intrude this one. You can see I have all these different measure or controls of my movements. And here on purpose, I'm actually going to do some overlap or intersections between the teeth, because we have a way to detect them. And this is really the exercise here for this patient, I guess, is we need some space. I mean, we have probably a little too much to fit into the lower jaw, at least. So what I'm doing here is actually I'm trying to fit the teeth. I'm overlapping them on purpose. And I will look at the collision detection tool that we have. And this will indicate me what kind of space saving we can do. And we'll look at the methods that we can use to simulate extractions or IPR for this patient in the second video.
Yes.
All right, so I'm just doing this briefly. You can see the color information is not on the areas that I'm exposing. And another thing that's quite important, also you can see the segmentation here of this tooth was kind of rough, and that's on purpose. That means we don't invent geometry we don't have. So we have a tool for this. So when you do the segmentation and you have a situation like this, you can actually smooth the tooth edges.
All right.
So you do it in the kind of predictable, or you do it beforehand because you know you're going to expose this area of the tooth. So the tool is not here at the virtual setup stage, and that's on purpose because this is something that really is going to be implemented before you even start doing the virtual setup. That's supposed to represent the geometry of the patient teeth. But this is the idea that this indication of no colors, that's because we didn't have this information before we started.
All right.
Right. So now, as promised, I'm going to click on that little button, and it's going to give me information about my collisions.
Okay. And there are obviously collisions.
There are many collisions, and they are actually all summarized. I'm going to remove the soft tissue, so hopefully we have a better look at it. So you can see here we have collisions to the antagonist. And if I were to move this tooth and extrude it, in real time, my collisions will be updated.
Oh, cool.
So this is really very neat also to keep an eye on what's going on the other side. But what I wanted to look at here was more the interproximal collisions. So if I zoom in, you can see some values. So this is the selected tooth. I can select this one instead, but the value will still show up because it's for this tooth and the next one. So now we have this value of 0.51. It's kind of small.
Yeah, so it's about 0.5 millimeter overlap here.
And it is actually, the very nice feature here is that the direction of this collision, or the way it's measured, is actually shown on this tool. So if you look carefully, you can see this little segment is actually showing in which direction the measures were taken. And this is a very good indication for if you want to do, for example, IPR or interproximal reductions, then you can use this as a guideline. And it actually, you could take a screenshot of this to keep in mind how the IPR should be performed in which direction. So this is simply because we cannot compute, collisions between two objects that are not very geometrical without having this indication. Because it's very hard otherwise to show the user what kind of, where this measure was taken. Because it can change a lot. But this is really taking the maximum, of course, intersection between these two objects that happen to be teeth. So that's the collision detection tool, and the way you can use it. You can also change the thresholds. So if we have a threshold, now it's very low. It's at 0.01. But if I wanted to raise it, saying I have some tolerance for more tolerance for the interproximal reductions, then I can change it here, and anything that will be under this will be gray as a collision instead. So we have the arch shape. As I said, we can create arch shapes on the upper, we can create on the lower, and we can use this as a guide. In the next video, I will show you how we can use additional guides also for the virtual setup.
Right.
Because we have many tools, we can use 2D guides and grades and so on, and symmetry guides, so that they will help us to perform a setup according to some guidelines. I'm just going to go back into the occlusal view. You can really go here and change. You can do your setup in any kind of state that you want the patient to be in. So it's also quite important to be able to validate what you're doing in real time. And this is really what happens here.
Is there a way you can get an overview of what you've done so far in terms of movements?
Yes. So this is also every movement that I've done. And of course, I haven't fixed the upper
yet,
obviously.
Obviously.
But this could be an example of, you could have this first, treatment proposal. We're going to work on the lower. We can do any type of, different stages that you want. But in any case, all the movements are here.
So you clicked on the teeth movement overview there.
I clicked on this teeth movement overview, and any tooth that I've changed has its movement summarized.
Got it.
Here. So this is really summarizing the actual treatment plan for the patient. And then finally, if you're satisfied with your setup, which is obviously not the case here, but for the purpose of the demonstration, we're going to say it is, we were going to be able to export it. So as Henrik has mentioned, we have this model set concept that will be, if I use this export feature,
because
it will populate the patient browser.
Right, because right now I would not be able to see from the patient browser what you've just done.
Exactly, unless you do this. So it's quite important to do this if you want to do treatment monitoring. For example, if you have a patient you want to follow during the treatment, you have made a treatment plan and you want to make sure we're on the right track. Well, this would be the way to do it. So you could export this. So I press here, and I will export the model set. So the model set is really this entity that exists into the patient browser. And by exporting it as a model set, then if I had a series, I could take all of them from here, but it is exactly the same feature. Well, exporting the model set will create this entry into the patient browser and allows me to go back to it at a later stage to do the actual monitoring. But you need to perform this export to be able to promote it, if you want, into the patient browser.
With you.
And finally, I will also be able to have a treatment simulation or a video showing what I've been doing. So you can use this also to present it to the patient. And of course, again, it's not going to be very telling on the upper because I didn't do much. But we can have a look here on the lower. And just bear in mind that whatever you have on screen is going to be what's captured. So if you want to, of course, show the full jaw or just the teeth without soft tissue, you just remove it. You can remove the arch shape, and then I can do this export here of the video with a little play button here. I'm going to be able to animate my setup.
So basically see what you've done here.
So now you will see the setup is going to be animated. Of course, it takes a little while to load it.
Okay, that's actually pretty cool. So
Yeah. So
whatever step you made basically is now being animated.
Yeah. So now the whole setup is animated. I don't have any sub setups, which is something we'll look at in another video, but it actually does the division of the movements on screen. So this is great for presentation, of course.
Yeah.
And this video is saved into the folder of the patient in our auto data folder.
Yeah, as a normal AVI file.
Yes.
I guess. Yeah.
So yeah, it's done now and it's saved. So if I just go back to the default, and I can actually simulate the same thing. So if I go back to the default, you can always go back to the default state. That's where you started from.
Yeah.
And then if you click on your treatment proposal here, well, it's going to show you the result of your work as well. Except it's not exporting the video right now.
Yeah.
And then you want to save, and again, if you haven't exported your virtual setup, it's still inside the patient case, inside the auto planner, but it's not visible from the model set list.
All right. Thank you. And I think that concludes the content of the first video. And I'm really excited about the next videos because I think we've only used one of the 8 exciting tools down there, I can see. So that concludes the video for now. Make sure to check out the upcoming videos in this series, and thank you for watching.